There are now more than 100 cases across the country.
The coronavirus is here in the U.S.
California now under a state of emergency.
We're cutting through the clutter with the practical information you need to know.
Experts recommend washing your hands regularly.
The precautions you should take.
Do not touch your face.
And what health officials are doing to slow the spread. Coronavirus, facts, not fear, starts now.
Hello, I'm Sogomonian. You're watching KRON on. Testing shortfalls past and present are taking center stage as President Trump touts a handful of states are prepared to reopen some of their businesses. But governors of the states hit hardest by the coronavirus say there's a long way to go. Karen has the details from Washington.
President Trump says a few states are ready to open some businesses within the next week.
We continue to see a number of positive signs that the virus has passed its peak.
The president pointing to Vermont and Montana and Texas, where the governor says a phased reopening will begin Monday. Still, crowds gathered in front of the state capitol in Austin calling for more openings faster. But governors in the hardest hit states say large-scale testing capabilities need to come first.
Testing is how you monitor the rate of infection and you control for it. And that is the whole tension in reopening.
There is new insight into how testing got off to such a slow start in the U.S. in the first place. FDA officials say contamination in the CDC's manufacturing of the tests likely led to weeks of delays. Right now, Chicago and Boston are areas of concern to Dr. Deborah Birx of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, but she says national trends are pointing in a better direction.
This is really reassuring to us of the progress we're making across the country.
Meanwhile, weekend negotiations continued between congressional Democrats and the White House on a deal to add more money to a small business relief program. Initial funding ran out in about 2 weeks. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
A new academic article says that the U.S. must more than triple coronavirus testing to safely reopen the economy. Researchers at Harvard's Global Health Institute and School of Public Health say the goal should be at least 500,000 tests a day. And right now, the number is closer to 150,000. The researchers say the percentage of positive tests is too high right now, and they say that means the U.S. doesn't have a grasp on the severity of this crisis and how to safely reopen society. The World Health Organization has suggested that an adequate test positive rate should be between 3 and 12%, and it reports the U.S. is around 20%. And this is what health experts are worried about: people breaking physical distancing rules and ditching the protective gear. This was a scene at Jacksonville Beach in Florida shortly after it reopened today. And we have the latest numbers of coronavirus cases and deaths here in the Bay Area. Taking a look at Santa Clara County, they now have more than 1,800 cases with 73 people who died. San Mateo County has 838 cases with 28 deaths. San Francisco County has more than 1,100 cases and 20 deaths. Contra Costa County has 685 cases with 19 deaths. Alameda County has more than 1,000 cases and 41 people have died. Marin County has 187 cases with 10 people have died there. Solano County has 169 reported cases and 2 deaths. Sonoma County has 180 cases and 2 deaths. And Napa County has 47 cases and 2 deaths. The FDA is trying to explain the lag in coronavirus testing, claiming the problem was how the CDC initially manufactured the test. The FDA claims they apparently violated its own manufacturing protocol and the tests had become contaminated. A federal review of the matter is expected by next year. Some promising news on a drug that's being tested to fight the coronavirus. Scientists say that early treatment with REMDESMIR reduced disease and damage to lungs of monkeys who were infected with the virus. The drug was developed by the Bay Area company called Gilead Sciences, and researchers say that testing indicates that early treatment shows significant promise. Thousands of motel and hotel rooms in California are up and running and ready to shelter the homeless during this pandemic. In fact, thousands of people are already being housed. Governor Gavin Newsom, along with San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo, updated Project Room Key today.
We have 1,123 rooms that can be available now for those COVID positive individuals, those homeless individuals who are vulnerable, to come in from the cold.
San Jose's mayor and what's happening in the hot spot of Santa Clara County. Statewide, there are now nearly 11,000 motel rooms available to shelter the homeless during the pandemic. It is a move considered critical to curb the spread of the virus. As of Saturday, 4,211 people are already being housed. Not that this has been easy. Some communities have been resisting the idea of homeless and potentially infected people moving into their towns and cities. The governor says he'll deal with it.
And then there are folks that just turn their backs and say it's someone else's problem and point fingers. And we have a few of those, unfortunately. And I just want to say this, my heart goes out to them as well. I get the politics of this. It's tough. And I just want them to know I have their back. And if you need support, I'll take the arrows in my back. I'll create some space. And so call me and let me see what I can do to secure your anxiety.
The governor is hoping some of what's been happening to help the homeless now will continue long term. Meantime, he was asked again about including Bay Area billionaire Tom Steyer to a special task force on restoring jobs and the economy, some arguing the former candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination is too partisan.
But I appreciate Tom's leadership, his willingness to take this on, and I'll put up what he's done in his community bank and a focus on the triple bottom line up against anybody's philanthropy in the last decade. I look forward to his leadership and stewardship of this council.
That was Catherine Heenan reporting. Project Roomkey is getting a big boost from Motel 6, which will add another 5,000 rooms to the project across 19 counties. In other news, face coverings are now required in Sonoma County. The public health order took effect just yesterday. KRON's Philippe Jagal has that story from Santa Rosa.
2 days into an order issued by the Sonoma County Public Health Officer, and it appears all residents are getting the point. It requires that everyone within the county wear face coverings when entering an indoor facility, like here at Rotten Robbie in Santa Rosa off Guerneville Road, where signs are posted out front asking the public to put a face covering on before entering the business. This does not apply to those who have underlying respiratory issues and their breathing would be restricted as a result of wearing the mask. It's also recommended that those of us who are 2 years of age or younger not wear these masks. You also don't need to wear the mask if you're driving in a car by yourself or with somebody else in your household, but if there's anybody else in the car that's not from your household, the mask needs to be on. It also needs to be on if you're approached by law enforcement on the road, or a first responder, or even here at a drive-through restaurant and have to interact with food service workers. This order, the county health officer says, is based on scientific evidence issued by the state of California and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They say that since this virus is highly contagious and can remain in the air or on surfaces for hours or possibly days after possibly being exposed, it's important that we all wear face coverings to protect others from becoming infected. This order is indefinite. It could also be amended at some point. It's also enforceable by law. In Santa Rosa, Philippe Jagal, KRON 4 News.
Thanks, Philippe. And Walmart is now asking all of its workers to wear masks, announcing that policy change yesterday as well. Walmart will provide the masks once workers pass health screenings and temperature checks. Workers can also wear their masks on their own if they brought some, and shoppers will also be encouraged to cover their faces while inside the stores. Walmart, in the meantime, is bringing on 50,000 new workers to help deal with increased demand. This comes on the heels of a previous hiring surge of 150,000 new employees. Walmart is the nation's largest grocer, and it's one of the few big box retailers that's remained open during this pandemic. With people stuck at home, sales of household staples are significantly up, and now Walmart says it needs more temporary and part-time workers to meet that demand.
The Paycheck Protection Program funding is now fully drained. It's out. It's gone. $350 billion to small businesses, and in turn it goes to the employees of those small businesses. Lawmakers must stop blocking these funds and replenish the program without delay.
President Trump announcing that the Small Business Loan Protection Plan has run out of money. This is his own. Trump properties have collectively furloughed nearly 2,000 workers across several states. Public records show the largest chunk of them are in Florida. Facilities in Chicago, Las Vegas, and Washington, D.C. are also affected. According to the organization, Trump National Doral Miami has furloughed 560 employees, while Trump's Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach has furloughed 153 non-essential employees. The organization's human resources said that the furloughs are expected to be temporary. Terms of the stimulus package prevent President Trump and his family from getting federal relief funds for his businesses. Local leaders want the federal government to provide more of those loans to small businesses that are struggling. KRON Sanaz Tahernia got some details from a San Mateo County supervisor.
The reason we approved, the Congress approved the CARE Act is to make sure that we can get money into businesses' hands. But in fact, the CARE Act has been non-caring because no one has received that benefit that I know of with the businesses. So the federal government, Congress, really needs to step up. I know there's some deliberations and talks about $250 billion. Hopefully they do the right thing and they approve those dollars as soon as possible.
$250 billion is obviously a very large sum of money, objectively speaking. But then when you think to yourself how many small businesses there are in the country that would be applying for this during this time, it almost seems as though, they'd be going through that sum in a very, very, quick amount of time. It's especially important for businesses here in the Bay Area and really large cities, but more so in the Bay Area because everything is so expensive here. The cost of rent is so expensive. Wages tend to be a little higher because cost of living here is expensive. So it is exceptionally important for people within your district and the Bay Area in general to be able to have access to this money that the government is set to provide.
You're exactly right. But when this money is given to chains, and not given to small business owners, that's problematic. And the federal government needs to act immediately. They need to make sure that they get the resources into those small business owners' hands. And what we're starting to see, and you're starting to see it, some of those business owners are starting to close. The County of San Mateo has created a fund. It's called SMC Strong. The county has put millions of dollars into the fund. Public-private partners have helped us. And we're getting those dollars to those businesses are important, but we need our federal partners to really step up.
The pandemic has led to the loss of more than 100,000 jobs here in California. The state's unemployment rate hit 5.3% in March, and it's expected to get much worse. The reported job losses are based on a survey taken the week that included March 12th. Most job losses came after that date. Governor Newsom issued a mandatory stay-at-home order on March 19th. The biggest losses were in the leisure and hospitality industries. The governor is now asking leaders of some of the country's biggest companies and labor unions to help plot strategy for the days ahead. He announced a task force on business and jobs recovery. That includes Tom Steyer, a Bay Area billionaire philanthropist who ran for the Democratic presidential nomination. He'll share duties with Newsom's chief of staff. The creation of the task force comes after more than 3 million Californians have filed for unemployment. A lot of Americans already have their stimulus checks in hand, even as many lawmakers continue to argue that they're not enough and more help is needed. Washington, D.C. correspondent Trevor Shirley has that story.
Ohio Democratic Representative Tim Ryan says to save the economy, almost every American making less than $130,000 a year needs a monthly $2,000 payment from the government.
And it stays in place every single month until the unemployment rate gets back to where it was pre-COVID-19.
His proposed legislation also covers college students and senior citizens, along with $500 for all dependents under 16.
So if you want a quick recovery, to me, this is the best way to do it.
$1,200 emergency stimulus payments from the CARES Act started arriving this week, but Ryan says that's not enough to guarantee long-term stability.
It's got to be more bold, more robust, and more directly into the pockets of the American people.
But already some conservative groups say Ryan's idea does more harm than good.
And I think we need to look at the cost of this. This would be $500 billion plus per month in additional spending.
The Heritage Foundation's Joel Griffith says targeted payments to the unemployed is a better solution.
Going ahead and dropping money helicopter style That just saddles all of us with debt, erodes the value of our dollar.
But Ryan says he's hopeful Republicans will get on board.
We've made adjustments to really work on getting it down to the grassroots level, and I hope that appeals to a lot of the conservative Republicans.
He wants a vote in the House once Congress returns to Washington. Reporting in Washington, I'm Trevor Shirley.
Our farmers say that a low demand for their crops is causing lots of food to be thrown away, but Paul Verkmanen reports that food banks could certainly use that surplus.
Agribusiness communities throughout California suffering unemployment now 5.3%. This is Santa Paula, population 30,000. And at this food share event, everybody driving up to get a box of free food and a bag of produce. And the people at Food Share Ventura County saying they're seeing a lot of new faces, people who never before needed that helping hand.
It's work furloughs, it's reduced hours, it's actually losing their job. You know, it's a combination of all of those that is causing people to have to go out and wait in line to be able to get their food.
I work at the Santa Paula Unified School District, and so I work for the after-school program. Since the kids aren't in school, I'm not in school, and since the kids aren't back in school, I probably won't be back till August.
And then the growers here in this county, they say people are just not demanding their produce, not the restaurants and not the stores. We came upon one farmer who basically had to just hack up a bunch of celery and leave it in the field because there was no one to buy it.
It's not going in the garbage, it's going back into the ground, which puts some nutrients back in the ground, but it's a very expensive way to do that. Because of the decrease in demand, we're only harvesting a few days a week just to cut to order and special orders for customers that already have contracts with us. So consequently, our employees are working less hours and less days.
I'm married, I got 3 kids, so it's been kind of like hard for us to provide like some food. Yeah, because we had some bills to pay, we had to pay the rent.
So unprecedented numbers of Californians streaming through these pop-up food distribution events like this. When will it end? They just don't know. They're ramping up and preparing for the next waves. In Santa Paula, California, I'm Paul Verkmanen. Now back to you.
As mentioned, more people are relying on food banks during this pandemic, and nationwide, one estimate says that there's been a hike in demand of nearly 40%. Natasha Chen has that story.
This bumper-to-bumper traffic wasn't caused by any car accident, nor is it any rush hour commute. For many of the people in these cars, there is no more commute because there's no longer a job, no longer a paycheck. And because of that, with increasing alarm, there is no more food.
So as people are getting furloughed and losing their jobs, they need to get access to food.
Across America, from coast to coast, in red states and blue, in big cities and small towns, are scenes like these. People who can no longer afford to go to the grocery store. People who don't know where their next meal will come from or how they'll pay for it. They're lining up, in many cases for miles, for donations at food banks.
We're seeing a lot of folks out here that have never had to seek food assistance before, so we're very sensitive to that.
This really is going to help us a lot because we don't have no income at all.
No income?
No, none of us is working, and we have kids, and they don't know that we don't have money to support them.
At a time when the word unprecedented is used frequently to describe the pandemic's havoc, these unsettling images do have a precedent, and it's a sobering one. The New York Times editorial board called it the contemporary equivalent of the old black and white images of Americans standing in bread lines during the Great Depression. In some states, the demand has been so great, the National Guard has been called in to help food banks with coordination and distribution.
1,396 Louisiana National Guardsmen who are working on COVID missions. They've helped to package 1.1 million pounds of food at food banks across the state.
Meanwhile, some farmers across the country have been left with no choice but to dump the crops that are typically sold to restaurants that are now closed. Some have tried to donate, like this Wisconsin creamery leaving milk for people to take, but delivering mass quantities of fresh produce in a small window of time before it goes bad is a challenge. The American Farm Bureau, along with the nationwide network of food banks Feeding America, have asked the U.S. Department of Agriculture to streamline a system that connects farms and food banks. But until that happens,
we don't have a buffer. There's no safety net for these folks. There's no savings.
We're likely to see more food going unused and more lines of people that could certainly have used it. Natasha Chen, CNN, Atlanta.
More than 200 people in Southern California gathered Friday to protest the governor's stay-at-home order. The so-called March for Freedom drew supporters to Huntington Beach, where they waved flags and held signs up. Some say that they're concerned about local businesses. Others claim the pandemic is a hoax. Local officials recently closed parking along the Pacific Coast Highway to discourage beach visits. The rally was peaceful, there were no arrests, and similar protests are happening in other states, including Michigan. Take a look at the similar scene of protesters in Concord, New Hampshire, who are also demanding to reopen the economy. They were just outside of the State House earlier today. Meanwhile, dozens protested the stay-at-home order outside of the governor's mansion in Indianapolis, too. And you can see police stopped at the site of protesters who were in their cars as they circled the downtown area of Annapolis, Maryland, holding signs and honking their horns as they also called on their governor to reopen their state. Health officials continue to warn against trying to reopen places too quickly. Canada's Prime Minister says that the United States and Canada have agreed to keep their border closed for another 30 days. That's aside from travel deemed essential. That includes cross-border workers like healthcare professionals, airline crews, and truck drivers. The truck drivers are supplying grocery stores and medical goods in both directions. The Air Force is stepping up to help create protective equipment for healthcare workers. That includes the staff at Travis Air Force Base. Olivia DeGennaro has that story.
Our own airmen working in the hospital came to us with some problems, and they were trying to figure out ways to extend the life of their protective equipment because obviously there's a supply chain issue nationwide.
They got that call about 2 weeks ago, and today several divisions of Travis Air Force Base have already shifted gears.
So right now we're making face shields primarily, different types of N95 mask covers.
3D printers normally used to create aircraft parts are now operating around the clock to print PPEs inside the Phoenix Spark Lab on base.
It's something that has always just interested me from the very beginning, being able to design and create your own things.
Staff Sergeant Max Estrada has been working from home, and he too is using 3D printers in his garage to make supplies.
So at the current rate right now, we have another 3 individuals printing from their homes, and we're able to do about 30 face shields a day.
And PPE production has now expanded to other divisions on base too.
So we're here now at this giant warehouse on base where they make normally a lot of aircraft parts, as you can imagine, but now they've shifted their focus to several different types of protective equipment for healthcare workers.
We've developed an eyeglasses clip that clips onto the side of any safety glasses, and a face shield can be attached to that.
Inviting any airman to come into the aircraft maintenance shop to think outside the box.
Our career field is so diverse, we're just naturally innovative, and we're always looking to solve problems.
They've also designed an intubation chamber to protect doctors and nurses from any fluids while working on a patient. And their latest invention, a plastic covering for a gurney, so paramedics will be protected when transporting people with COVID-19 symptoms to the hospital.
It goes on and off really easy, it's easy to clean. It's something we'd love to share with anyone that would want to make it for their own hospital.
Across the nation, Air Force bases are sharing these ideas with one another and using their resources to help people on the front lines in any way they can. At Travis Air Force Base, Olivia DeGennaro, Fox 40 News.
That's just fantastic. Meanwhile, people across the Bay Area have been social distancing for more than a month now. Some people cope just fine, but for others it can feel lonely and stressful and could even lead to thoughts of suicide. Today, Catherine Heenan talked to the executive director of the Crisis Support Services of Alameda County.
We have been tracking our call volume related to the virus since mid-March, when it seemed like there was going to be a shelter in place, and we could definitely see that pattern changing the day after the governor announced the shelter in place. And since then, there has been an increase, I would say almost daily and weekly, in the number of calls that are focused on the virus, or that they mention the virus as one of the primary stressors.
Now, just give us an idea of the kind of support you offer.
Definitely. So I would say the primary kinds of calls we're getting related to the virus is full of anxiety and stress. And for that, we really acknowledge that there is no roadmap when it comes to unfamiliar stressors, and making sure people understand that they're not alone in how they're feeling, because sometimes there's a sense of shame when people are having a hard time. acknowledging the decision-making fatigue that comes with unfamiliar situations. So we're all making decisions all day, every day regarding what's safe for us, for our families, what to do and what not to do. So helping people focus on what they can control seems to be very helpful, and creating routines whenever possible, even if that is at 10 o'clock every morning, I go for a walk around the block, or on Mondays, I go grocery shopping. So helping people zoom into what they can control tends to help them feel, have a better sense of the situation and have it feel more manageable as opposed to out of control and overwhelming.
Anything before we go that has surprised you on this journey the last month or so?
I think what's been surprising is hearing people try and cope with taking care of themselves while also worrying about the larger community and their family members. For people not having access to their children or older adult relatives, the impact of that, and really how physical distancing, even when we still have social connections, can have such a negative impact on people's mental health. So that's something that we have never dealt with before. So it's something that I definitely am noticing, and helping people connect to their communities every day seems to be the most important part.
Hopefully people can find some sort of silver lining here. In other news, scientists around the world are trying to find a cure for the coronavirus, and now researchers at UC Santa Barbara are hoping that their ultraviolet research can help. Scott Shane explains.
Harness the power of light. The UV LED project is developing new ways to create more efficient lighting.
Here at UCSB, we make UV LEDs from scratch, which means we start with a semiconductor wafer and we build it up layer by layer.
It's a project that has evolved over 2 decades on UCSB's campus. It started with developing lights for homes, winning the lead researcher a Nobel Peace Prize. More recently, the project turned its focus to cleaning, something that's never been more important than now.
The purpose of UV LEDs is primarily for disinfection. That's the biggest application that we're really interested in. So very short wavelength UV called UVC is effective in killing germs. So it can be used for water disinfection, air disinfection, many other things in addition to that.
The project started as a way to use UV LED light to disinfect water, but since the COVID-19 health pandemic, they're trying to use the same technology to disinfect personal protective equipment or other surfaces like air and water from the coronavirus.
That's what we do. We increase the efficiency and the power of the lights. So as the efficiency and power increase, the time required to disinfect goes down. And in one case, I saw they were able to disinfect an entire surface in 30 seconds.
UCSB researchers hope their more efficient LEDs can help other companies develop new technologies to fight COVID-19. And if the National Institute of Health or the NIH confirms it works, it could eventually be used to clean even more.
We think it'll then eventually go into disinfection of personal protective gear, which has just recently been demonstrated by the NIH. Hopefully someday air conditioning too, because as you know, the air on an airplane or in a bus currently isn't sterilized.
Alcohol-based cleaners can cause surfaces to deteriorate over time, which is a problem for protective equipment. But that's not the case with UV LED, which can be a game changer.
And for decades, dogs have been used to sniff out drugs, bombs, bodies, and even cancer. Now a team of British researchers are hoping dogs can help detect the coronavirus. A London school is working with specially trained dogs to develop a new kind of test, one that doesn't require a swab, just to sniff. Researchers recently discovered that dogs can detect malaria infections in humans, and they're hoping that it will work with the coronavirus as well. In other news, KRON is honoring our neighbors who are making a difference during this pandemic, and today it's Beverly Ulbrich, also known as the Pooch Coach. The San Francisco dog trainer and her dog Music have been using social media to let the community know which businesses are open. Beverly takes pictures of Music in front of these different businesses, and the dog has more than 33,000 followers on Instagram, so they're helping to get the word out. Thank you so much to the both of them. You can spotlight somebody making a difference in your community on our website, KRON4.com. For now, you're watching KRON, streaming Bay Area News 24/7.